Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal, financial, or psychological advice. Divorce laws vary significantly by state and individual circumstances are unique. Therefore, the historical trends and potential outcomes discussed here should not be taken as a substitute for the counsel of a licensed attorney, a certified financial planner, or a mental health professional in your specific jurisdiction. We strongly encourage all viewers to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making any major life decisions regarding their marital status, assets, or legal rights. In the United States today, nearly 70% of all divorces are initiated by women. When you narrow that data down to college-educated women, that number climbs even higher, reaching closer to 90%. For decades, the cultural narrative suggested that divorce was a sign of a failing society or a personal collapse. However, we are currently witnessing one of the most significant sociological pivots in American history. This is not merely a trend. It is a fundamental restructuring of the American domestic contract. We are moving away from an era where marriage was a tool for economic survival, and into an era where it is judged by the metrics of self-actualization, equity, and emotional resonance. If you feel like the ground is shifting beneath your feet, it is because the very definition of a successful life has changed. This video is the first part of a comprehensive masterclass designed to deconstruct these cultural shifts and provide a roadmap for the modern American woman, navigating the complexities of the legal and social landscape of divorce. To understand why so many women are choosing to walk away today, we have to look at the historical trends that brought us here. For much of the 20th century, the American marriage was built on a model of specialization. One partner, typically the husband, provided financial security while the other, typically the wife, managed the domestic sphere. This was less a romantic choice and more a structural necessity. Before the mid-1970s, a woman in many parts of the U.S. could not even open a bank account or obtain a credit card without her husband's signature. This created a forced dependency that kept divorce rates artificially low. When we look at the spike in divorce rates following the passage of no-fault divorce laws, starting with California in 1969 and spreading across the country, we aren't seeing a sudden decline in the quality of marriages. Instead, we are seeing the emergence of the divorce backlog, where thousands of women who had been socially and economically trapped finally had a legal mechanism to leave. As we move into the current decade, the shift has evolved from basic legal rights to a deeper demand for the new equity. Case studies of modern American households often reveal a phenomenon known as the second shift. Despite women entering the workforce in record numbers and often out-earning their spouses, data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics continues to show that women perform a disproportionate amount of household labor and cognitive labor, often referred to as the mental load. This includes the invisible work of scheduling, emotional regulation of the family unit, and domestic management. When the domestic contract feels lopsided, where a woman is providing 50% of the income but performing 80% of the domestic work, the value proposition of the marriage begins to erode. We are seeing a cultural shift where women are no longer willing to sacrifice their mental health for the sake of maintaining a traditional image of the nuclear family. The potential outcomes of this shift are profound. We are seeing the rise of the silver divorce, where women over the age of 50 are choosing to end long-term marriages after their children have left the home. Historical trends show that for this demographic, the primary driver is often a realization that they have 20 or 30 years of active, healthy life ahead of them, and they no longer wish to spend that time in a partnership that lacks emotional intimacy or mutual respect. This is a radical departure from previous generations of American women, who might have viewed their post-parenting years as a time to simply endure a stagnant relationship. Today, the cultural emphasis is on the third act of life, where personal growth and independence are prioritized. This masterclass will address the specific hurdles that women face in this new landscape. We will explore how the American legal system handles the division of assets in a dual-income household, the complexities of alimony in an era of female breadwinners, and the psychological impact of the good mother trope that often keeps women from seeking the help they need. The problem we are solving today is the information gap. Many women feel a sense of overwhelming guilt or fear because they are looking at their lives through an outdated lens. They are using 1950s expectations to judge a 2020s reality. We will break down the step-by-step details of the transition process. First, we will examine the decision phase, where we analyze the difference between a rough patch and a structural misalignment. We will look at data regarding marital therapy, and the potential outcomes of mediation versus litigation. Second, we will dive into the financial blueprint. In a country where healthcare is often tied to employment and retirement accounts are complex, understanding your marital standard of living is a critical legal benchmark. Third, we will discuss the social reconfiguration. American culture is still caught between two worlds, one that celebrates independence and one that still carries a subtle stigma toward divorced women. We will provide the language and the framework to navigate this social transition without losing your sense of community. The promise of this deep dive is clarity. By the end of this 10-part series, you will not just have a better understanding of why the culture is changing, you will have a tactical understanding of how to protect your interests, your children, and your future. We are moving past the why and getting into the how. How do you audit your marital assets? How do you choose a legal team that aligns with your goals? How do you manage the high-conflict personality in a system that often rewards aggression? This is not a guide on how to get a divorce. It is a masterclass on how to navigate a massive cultural and personal transition with dignity and intelligence. The American woman of today is more educated, more financially capable, and more self-aware than any generation that came before her. It is only natural that her approach to marriage and divorce would be equally sophisticated. We are going to look at real-world examples of how women have successfully restructured their lives, maintaining financial stability and emotional health. We will analyze the lifestyle analysis that forensic accountants use to determine support, and we will look at the psychological research on bird nesting and other modern co-parenting models that are replacing the traditional, every other weekend custody arrangements. The shift we are discussing is a movement toward transparency and authenticity. For too long, the help available for women in this position was either overly clinical or overly judgmental. This series aims to be neither. It is a grounded, evidence-based exploration of the legal, financial, and cultural realities of divorce in modern America. We are opening the loop today on a conversation that most people are only having in hushed tones. By the time we reach part 10, that loop will be closed with a comprehensive understanding of your rights, your options, and the historical momentum that is currently on your side. Prepare to dive deep into the data, the law, and the new American social contract. This is part 1, the foundation of your path forward. To move from the philosophical shift of the American woman into the practical reality of her exit strategy, we must first address the most intimidating pillar of the entire process, the financial reconstruction. In 2026, the American economy presents a unique set of challenges for women navigating divorce. We are living in a period of high asset volatility, complex digital portfolios, and a housing market that has redefined the meaning of home equity. Understanding your financial standing is no longer a task you can delegate. It is the core of your legal strategy. Imagine if you are Sarah, a 44-year-old software project manager living in a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. Sarah has been married for 16 years. Like many women in 2026, she is a high earner, contributing nearly 60% of the household income. For years, Sarah has managed the day-to-day bills, while her husband, Michael, managed the long-term investments and the mortgage. Sarah assumes that because she has seen the monthly statements for their joint checking account, she has a clear picture of their net worth. This is a common and dangerous misconception. When Sarah finally decides to file for divorce, she realizes that she has no idea what the cost basis of their brokerage account is. She doesn't know if there is a secondary line of credit on their home, and she has never seen the summary plan description for Michael's corporate pension. Sarah's story illustrates the first major hurdle: the transition from financial participation to financial mastery. In the United States, the legal process of dividing assets begins with a document often called a financial affidavit or a statement of net worth. This is a comprehensive sworn document that lists every penny earned, spent, owned, and owed. Historical trends show that many women enter this phase with a significant information disadvantage. This is where the paper war begins. To achieve an equitable distribution, you must understand the distinction between marital property and separate property. Marital property generally includes all assets and debts acquired during the marriage, regardless of whose name is on the title. This sounds straightforward, but in 2026 it is rarely simple. Consider the concept of transmutation and commingling. If you entered the marriage with $100,000 in a personal savings account, a separate asset, but then used that money as a down payment on your marital home, that separate asset has likely been transmuted into a marital asset. Conversely, if you received an inheritance but kept it in a separate account and never used it for family expenses, it may remain separate property. Step by step, the first task is a forensic audit of your own history. You must trace the origin of every major asset. Data from the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers suggests that the discovery phase, the legal process where both parties must turn over financial documents, is where the most significant potential outcomes are determined. In Sarah's case, her legal team utilized a process called a lifestyle analysis. This is where a forensic accountant looks at the total spending of the family over the last 3 to 5 years to determine the true marital standard of living. Why does this matter? Because in 2026, income is often more than just a W-2 salary. It includes restricted stock units, performance bonuses, car allowances, and employer-paid insurance premiums. If Sarah's husband was reporting an income of $150,000, but their lifestyle costs $300,000 a year to maintain, the lifestyle analysis reveals the hidden income that will be critical for calculating potential child support or alimony. We must also look at the role of the Qualified Domestic Relations Order, or QDRO. For many American women, the largest asset outside of the home is a retirement account. However, you cannot simply withdraw half of a 401k and put it in your bank account without triggering massive tax penalties and early withdrawal fees. A QDRO is a specific legal mechanism that allows for the tax-free transfer of retirement funds from one spouse to another as part of a divorce settlement. Understanding the step-by-step execution of a QDRO is essential. It requires coordination between your attorney, the plan administrator of the employer, and the court. If Sarah ignores the QDRO, she might walk away with the house but lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars in future compounded growth that she is legally entitled to. Then there is the issue of the family home. In the current 2026 market, many American couples are sitting on significant home equity, but are locked into low-interest mortgage rates from years prior. This creates a trap. If Sarah wants to keep the house to provide stability for her children, she may have to refinance the mortgage to remove Michael's name. However, refinancing in 2026 might mean jumping from a 3% interest rate to a 7% interest rate, doubling her monthly payment. A deep dive into the financial data shows that keeping the house is often the most emotional decision a woman makes, but it can also be the most financially damaging. Case studies of post-divorce outcomes frequently show women who are house poor, meaning they have a beautiful home but no liquid cash to cover repairs, taxes, or daily expenses. Historical trends indicate that debt is often the most overlooked part of the equation. In a dual-income household, credit card debt, student loans, and HELOCs are often spread across multiple accounts. In many states, even if a credit card is only in your spouse's name, if the debt was incurred for marital purposes, like groceries, vacations, or home repairs, you could be held 50% responsible for that debt. Step by step, you must pull a full credit report for both yourself and your spouse. You need to identify every open line of credit and move to freeze joint accounts as soon as a status quo order is in place. This legal order, common in many jurisdictions, prevents either spouse from making large, unusual purchases or draining accounts once the divorce is filed. The complexity of 2026 also brings us to digital and intangible assets. We are seeing an increase in divorces involving intellectual property, small business valuations, and even high-value loyalty programs or digital collectibles. If you or your spouse started a business during the marriage, that business is likely a marital asset subject to valuation. This requires a professional appraiser who can look at the goodwill of the business, the value of the brand, and the customer base beyond just the physical equipment. For the modern American woman, this financial deep dive is not just about getting her fair share. It is about establishing a foundation for her independent future. The fear of the unknown is often worse than the reality of the numbers. When Sarah finally sat down with her forensic accountant and saw the full spreadsheet of their life, the fear began to dissipate. She realized she wasn't losing half of her life. She was gaining 100% of her autonomy. She began to see the potential outcomes not as a loss of security, but as a reallocation of resources that would finally serve her goals rather than a failing partnership. As we conclude this deep dive into the financial anatomy of a divorce, we have to recognize that the paper war is only the first front. While the numbers on a spreadsheet provide the framework, they do not account for the human element. The most perfect financial settlement in the world can still be undermined by a failure to understand the next critical component of this masterclass. The numbers are the skeleton, but the heart of the matter lies in the most contested, emotional, and legally complex area of the American divorce: the battle for the next generation. If you think the financial disclosure was difficult, Wait until we examine the shift in how American courts are redefining the best interests of the child. In our next part, we will look at why the traditional custody model is being dismantled in 2026, and the shocking tactical mistakes women make that can cost them years of peace. We are moving from the wallet to the nursery, and the stakes are about to get much higher. The transition from the wallet to the nursery is often where the most visceral conflict begins, because in 2026, the American legal system has undergone a quiet but radical transformation in how it defines the best interests of the child. For decades, the prevailing historical trend was the tender years doctrine, which essentially presumed that young children were better off with their mothers. As we sit here in 2026, that doctrine is not just dead. It has been replaced in over 20 states by a rebuttable presumption of equal shared parenting. This means that when you walk into a courtroom in jurisdictions like Florida, Arizona, or Kentucky, the judge starts with the assumption that a 50-50 time-sharing split is what is best for your children, regardless of who stayed home, who changed the most diapers, or who knows the name of the pediatrician. Imagine if you are Elena, a 38-year-old neonatal nurse in Austin, Texas. Elena has spent the last decade balancing 12-hour shifts with being the primary emotional anchor for her two young sons. Her husband, David, has traditionally traveled 4 days a week for his corporate sales job. In Elena's mind, the potential outcome of a custody battle is a foregone conclusion. She assumes she will be the primary conservator and David will have the standard expanded visitation schedule. However, in 2026, David's legal team presents a different narrative. They argue that David's remote work flexibility now allows him to be present 50% of the time. They present a proposal for a 2-2-3 schedule, where the children move back and forth every few days to ensure maximum contact with both parents. Elena is blindsided. She is facing the reality that her children might spend half their lives in a different household, under different rules, and she has no legal mechanism to stop it, unless she can prove that David is a direct threat to their safety. This brings us to the first major tactical mistake women make in 2026, the gatekeeping trap. In a high-stakes divorce, it is a natural human instinct to want to protect your children from a partner you no longer trust. But in the eyes of a 2026 family court judge, gatekeeping, or limiting the other parent's access to the children without a court-ordered reason, is often viewed as parental alienation. Case studies show that judges are increasingly willing to strip custody from the primary caregiver if they believe that parent is interfering with the child's relationship with the other parent. Step by step, you must document your willingness to co-parent. This means using co-parenting apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents for all communication. These apps create a court-admissible record of every interaction. In 2026, a mother who suggests a flexible schedule and documents her cooperation is far more likely to retain her influence than one who fights every 15 minutes of extra visitation. The second pillar of this masterclass part is the construction of the parenting plan. In 2026, a vague schedule is a recipe for 5 years of litigation. A professional parenting plan must be granular. It needs to address the right of first refusal. Imagine if David is supposed to have the kids on a Tuesday, but he gets called into an emergency meeting. If your parenting plan includes a 4-hour right of first refusal, David is legally obligated to call Elena and ask if she wants the kids before he calls a babysitter. Without this clause, Elena has no say in who watches her children during David's time. Your plan must also cover the digital lives of your children. In 2026, this includes who pays for the cell phone plans, who has the passwords to social media accounts, and at what age a child is allowed to have a personal device. We are seeing a rise in litigation specifically over Roblox accounts and TikTok privacy settings. If these details are not in the initial decree, you will spend thousands of dollars in legal fees later trying to modify it. We must also discuss the role of the custody evaluator, or the guardian ad litem. In 2026, these are the most powerful people in your divorce that you have never met. A guardian ad litem is an attorney appointed by the court to represent the best interests of the child. They will come to your home. They will look inside your refrigerator. They will interview your children's teachers and doctors. The potential outcomes of a divorce often hinge entirely on the 5-page report this individual writes. Step by step, your interaction with the custody evaluator must be professional, not emotional. Historical trends show that women who use these interviews to vent about their ex-husband's infidelities or personality flaws are often labeled as high conflict. The successful strategy in 2026 is to focus entirely on the child's needs. If you want to argue for more time, don't talk about why you deserve it. Talk about how the child's school schedule, extracurricular activities, and emotional stability are better served by the continuity you provide. Let's look at another case study, the relocation trap. In our mobile, post-pandemic 2026 economy, many women find themselves wanting to move back to their hometown for family support after a divorce. Imagine if Elena wants to move from Austin back to her parents in Ohio. In almost every American jurisdiction today, you cannot move more than 50 to 100 miles with the children without the court's permission or the other parent's consent. If Elena moves without a court order, she can be charged with parental kidnapping, even if she is the primary parent. The legal standard for relocation has become incredibly high. You must prove that the move provides a significant advantage to the child, not just a better job for the mother. Data suggests that in 2026, courts are more likely to deny relocation than at any point in the last 20 years because they prioritize the child's frequent and continuing contact with both parents over the mother's career or support system. Then there is the issue of parallel parenting versus co-parenting. We often hear the term co-parenting used as a positive goal. But for many women, co-parenting with a high-conflict or narcissistic ex-partner is impossible. In 2026, we are seeing a shift toward parallel parenting. This is a model where both parents are involved, but they have zero contact with each other. They use separate entrances at school events, they do not share information about their personal lives, and they follow the parenting plan with robotic precision. This model is often the only way to protect your mental health, while complying with the court's demand for shared parenting. You must understand that in 2026, the court does not care if you like your ex. They care that the children have access to both. The historical momentum of 2026 is pushing toward a world where the domestic labor you did during the marriage, the years of sacrifice and caregiving, does not translate into a legal advantage in custody. This is a hard truth that many women are not prepared for. It feels like a betrayal of the traditional social contract. But by understanding this shift, you can stop fighting a war based on yesterday's rules and start building a strategy based on today's reality. You stop being the victim of a changing system and start being the architect of a new life that prioritizes your children's peace and your own long-term stability. But even with the most perfect parenting plan and a solid financial audit, there is a third shadow looming over the modern American divorce. It is the one thing that no lawyer can truly prepare you for. And it is the reason so many women, even high earners, find themselves in a state of paralysis. It is the tactical use of psychological warfare in the legal system. In our next part, we are going to expose the playbooks used in 2026 to dismantle a woman's credibility in court. We are going to look at the rise of the parental alienation defense and the specific psychological traps that can turn a simple custody hearing into a years-long nightmare. If you think the legal system is a neutral arbiter of truth, you need to see what happens when the gavel actually drops. We are going into the courtroom, and the tactics we reveal might change everything you thought you knew about your case. The moment you step into a modern American courtroom in 2026, you must understand that you are no longer in a place of emotional healing. You are in a theater of evidence. The gavel does not drop on the truth of your heart. It drops on the narrative that is most effectively supported by the record. In this deep dive, we are exposing the psychological and tactical warfare that has become commonplace in high-conflict American divorces. We are seeing a specific historical trend where the legal system is increasingly being used as a tool for post-separation abuse. And for the modern woman, the most dangerous weapon used against her is the systematic dismantling of her credibility. Imagine if you are Chloe, a 35-year-old marketing director in Chicago. Chloe has spent years documenting her husband's erratic behavior and financial recklessness. She enters the courtroom with a mountain of screenshots and a clear memory of every grievance. However, her husband, Marcus, has hired a legal team that specializes in the parental alienation defense. Instead of defending his own actions, Marcus flips the script. He claims that the children's distance from him is not a result of his behavior, but a result of Chloe's subtle, psychological brainwashing. In the 2026 legal landscape, this is known as the silver bullet. By the time Chloe realizes what is happening, the focus of the court has shifted from Marcus's failures to Chloe's mental health. This is a tactical maneuver designed to put the protective parent on the defensive, forcing them to prove their own sanity rather than the other parent's inadequacy. To navigate this, we must analyze the rise of the parental alienation defense in 2026. While the concept has existed for decades, its application has become hyper-refined. Historical trends show that in cases where a mother raises concerns about domestic dysfunction or safety, The counter-allegation of parental alienation is successful in significantly altering custody outcomes in a staggering number of cases. The court's primary directive in 2026 is the maintenance of the child's relationship with both parents at almost any cost. Consequently, any behavior that can be framed as discouraging that relationship, even if it is done out of a legitimate concern for safety, can be weaponized against you. Step by step, the first defense against this is the professionalization of your communication. In 2026, every text message, email, and voicemail is a potential Exhibit A. Case studies show that women who engage in emotional arguments or use sarcasm in digital communication are frequently labeled as high conflict or uncooperative by court-appointed evaluators. To counter this, you must adopt the gray rock method. This means becoming as uninteresting and non-responsive as a gray rock. Your communication should be brief, informative, friendly, and firm. If a text from your ex-husband makes your blood boil, you do not respond with your feelings. You respond with facts. The children will be at the designated pickup location at 5 p.m. Thank you. By stripping away the emotional data, you deny the opposition the raw material they need to build a narrative of instability. The second front of this war is the psychological evaluation. In 2026, it is common for both parties to undergo a 730 evaluation or a similar court-ordered mental health assessment. This is where the diagnostic labeling game begins. We are seeing an increase in the use of personality inventory tests like the MMPI-3 to find any slight deviation from the norm that can be framed as a pathology. If you are grieving the end of your marriage and show signs of situational anxiety or depression, a skilled opposing counsel will attempt to frame this as a chronic personality disorder. To protect yourself, you must understand that the evaluator is not your therapist. They are a forensic investigator. Every word you say is being measured against a standard of parental fitness. Step by step, you must focus on your children's needs and your ability to facilitate their growth, rather than the trauma you have endured. In 2026, we must also address a new and terrifying frontier: the digital forensic war. With the advancement of artificial intelligence, we are seeing the first wave of cases where digital evidence is being challenged as fraudulent. Imagine if Marcus presents a recording of Chloe saying something she never said, or a series of texts that have been subtly altered to make her look aggressive. The potential outcomes of these cases are catastrophic if you do not have a strategy for digital verification. Historical trends suggest that the burden of proof is often placed on the person claiming the evidence is fake. This means that in 2026, a modern divorce strategy must include a digital forensic audit. You must ensure that all your evidence is preserved with its metadata intact, the hidden data that proves when, where, and how a file was created. If you are using screenshots, you are already behind. You need direct exports from the service providers to ensure the integrity of the record. Furthermore, we must look at the angry woman trope in the 2026 American courtroom. There is a documented sociological bias where a man expressing anger is often seen as being a strong advocate for his rights, while a woman expressing the same level of anger is seen as hysterical or unstable. This bias is subtle but pervasive. Case studies show that women who remain calm, composed, and even-toned in court, regardless of the provocations they face, have a significantly higher success rate in custody and support hearings. This is not fair, but it is the reality of the theater. Your goal is to be the most boring person in the room. You want the judge to look at you and see a reliable, stable, and predictable parent, while the opposition is the one losing their temper and making wild accusations. The strategy for 2026 is the creation of a credibility shield. This shield is built on 3 layers. First, third-party verification. In a he-said-she-said battle, the person with the most neutral witnesses wins. This means cultivating relationships with teachers, pediatricians, and coaches who can testify to your presence and stability, without being seen as biased family members. Second, contemporaneous logging. In 2026, a diary written in a notebook is easily dismissed. A digital log that is time-stamped and stored in a secure cloud environment is a powerful tool for showing patterns of behavior over months or years. Third, the expert witness. In a high-stakes case, you may need your own psychological expert to review the court-appointed evaluator's work. This expert acts as a check and balance, ensuring that the methodologies used to judge you were scientifically sound and free from bias. As we move through this masterclass, it becomes clear that the legal battle is as much about psychology as it is about statutes. The women who navigate this successfully in 2026 are the ones who treat the process like a high-stakes corporate merger or a complex project management task. They detach from the emotional hurt of the past and focus with laser precision on the evidentiary requirements of the future. They understand that every move is a chess move, and every word is a permanent record. But even if you win the battle for your kids and protect your reputation in court, there is a hidden trap waiting for you at the finish line. It is the one thing that can turn a legal victory into a lifelong financial or personal burden. Many women sign their final divorce decree thinking the nightmare is over, only to realize months later that they have signed away rights they didn't even know they had. In our next part, we are going deep into the secret clauses of 2026 divorce settlements. We are going to reveal the poison pill language that can drain your bank account years after the divorce is final, and the lifestyle restrictions that can keep you trapped under your ex-husband's thumb long after you've moved out. You need to know what to look for before you ever pick up that pen. The final signature is the most dangerous moment of the entire process, and we are going to show you exactly how to protect your future. The final signature on a marital settlement agreement is not the end of a conflict. It is the beginning of a new legal reality that will govern your life for the next decade or more. In 2026, many women are finding that the devil is not just in the details, but in the silence of the clauses they failed to include. We are seeing a historical trend where the complexity of modern assets, from crypto stake dividends to remote work tax jurisdictions, makes a standard boilerplate divorce decree more dangerous than ever. This is the moment where your future is either secured or sold for the sake of ending the stress of the day. Imagine if you are Maya, a 42-year-old marketing executive in Seattle. Maya has spent 18 months in a grueling legal battle with her ex-husband, a high-earning consultant. By the time they reach the final mediation session, Maya is emotionally exhausted. She just wants to be done. Her attorney presents her with a 60-page document. Maya schemes the big numbers, the child support amount looks right, she gets the house, and the retirement accounts are split 50-50. She signs. 6 months later, she receives a notice from the IRS. It turns out her ex-husband had been aggressively underreporting his consulting income through an offshore LLC during their final 2 years of marriage. Because Maya signed a joint tax return and her divorce decree lacked a specific, robust tax indemnification clause, the IRS is now looking to her for the back taxes, interest, and penalties. Her legal victory has just become a financial anchor. This illustrates the first poison pill of 2026, the indemnification trap. In many American jurisdictions, the IRS does not care what your divorce decree says about who is responsible for taxes. They care whose name is on the return. If you file jointly during the marriage, you are jointly and severally liable. To protect yourself, a deep dive masterclass approach requires a clause that not only assigns liability to the high earner, but also requires them to set aside funds in an escrow account to cover potential audits for the 3 years prior to the filing. Without this, you are effectively a co-signer on your ex-spouse's past financial integrity. Step by step, you must insist on a full tax indemnity that survives the final judgment, including a provision that requires the offending spouse to pay for your legal and accounting fees if an audit occurs. The second hidden trap in 2026 is the morality or cohabitation clause. We are seeing a cultural shift where some legal teams are reintroducing these archaic clauses to exert control over a woman's post-divorce social life. Imagine if Maya's decree stated that no unrelated overnight guests are allowed in the home while the children are present. In 2026, this is enforced not by private investigators, but by smart home technology. If Maya's ex-husband still has access to the Ring doorbell data, or if the children mention that a friend stayed over, Maya could find herself back in court facing a contempt charge or a motion to modify custody. These clauses are often framed as being for the protection of the children, but case studies show they are frequently used as a tool for harassment. You must scrutinize the language regarding your future home. If a cohabitation clause is included, it must be narrowly defined, usually involving a partner living in the home for more than 90 consecutive days, rather than a vague ban on overnight guests. Let us look at the healthcare cliff. In the United States, healthcare is a massive line item that many women overlook during the final settlement. If you were covered under your spouse's employer-sponsored plan, that coverage typically ends the moment the judge signs the final decree. While federal law provides for COBRA coverage, which allows you to stay on the plan for up to 36 months, the premiums in 2026 are staggering, often exceeding $2,000 a month for a family plan. If your settlement does not account for the cost of your independent healthcare premiums, you have effectively taken a massive pay cut the day you become single. A step-by-step negotiation should include a requirement for the higher-earning spouse to pay the COBRA premiums for a transition period, or to provide a lump sum payment specifically for your healthcare transition. Next, we must address the step-up basis in capital gains. In 2026, with the housing market having cooled from the peaks of the early 20s, many women are fighting to keep the family home. However, keeping the house can be a poison chalice. If you and your spouse bought the home years ago for $400,000 and it is now worth $900,000, there is a $500,000 gain. If you sell it while married, you get a $500,000 tax exclusion. If you take the house in the divorce and sell it later as a single person, your exclusion drops to $250,000. This means by keeping the house, you are also inheriting a massive future tax bill. To ensure an equitable distribution, the value of the house in your settlement must be calculated net of the potential capital gains tax. If your attorney isn't running these numbers, you aren't seeing the real value of your assets. Furthermore, consider the right of first refusal trap. This sounds like a great way to ensure your kids spend time with parents instead of sitters. It states that if a parent cannot be with the kids for more than 4 or 8 hours, they must offer that time to the other parent. But in the 2026 remote work economy, this can be weaponized. If Maya wants to go to a professional conference for 2 days and asks her mother to watch the kids, her ex-spouse could legally demand the kids come to his house instead, even if it disrupts their school schedule or Maya's plans. This creates a permanent tether to your ex-husband. The step-by-step detail here is to ensure the right of first refusal only triggers after a significant period, like 24 hours, and excludes routine help from grandparents or established childcare providers. Finally, we have to talk about the enforcement nightmare. A divorce decree is just a piece of paper unless it is enforceable. In 2026, we are seeing a rise in what is called death by 1,000 cuts litigation, where an ex-spouse intentionally defaults on small obligations, like paying for half of a soccer registration or a dental bill, knowing that the cost of hiring a lawyer to go to court is higher than the bill itself. To prevent this, your final decree must include an automatic fee-shifting provision. This clause states that if you have to go to court to enforce any part of the agreement, and you win, the other party must pay 100% of your legal fees and court costs. This turns a toothless agreement into a self-enforcing contract. The potential outcomes for women who ignore these technicalities are a slow drain of their resources, and an extension of the conflict they fought so hard to end. We have deconstructed the legal traps, the financial skeletons, and the hidden control mechanisms that can haunt a final signature. But as we move toward the conclusion of this masterclass, there is one final shift we need to address. It is the shift that happens inside the woman herself. You can have the best decree in America, but if you don't know how to step into the role of the primary decision maker, the system will still find ways to diminish you. In our next part, we are going beyond the courtroom and into the boardroom of your new life. We are going to discuss the social rebrand and the post-divorce power dynamic. How do you handle the shift in your social circle when friends start taking sides? How do you re-enter a workforce that might have passed you by? We are moving from legal defense to social offense. The most powerful version of you is about to be built, and we have the blueprint for the transformation. The social rebrand begins the moment the legal ink is dry, and in 2026, the social landscape for a divorced woman in America is vastly different than it was even 5 years ago. We are moving away from the era of the scarlet letter and into an era of the social pivot. However, just because the stigma has lessened doesn't mean the transition is seamless. You are essentially dismantling a brand, the brand of a couple, and launching a solo venture in a market that might have known you as half of a whole for a decade or more. Imagine if you are Olivia, a 45-year-old former interior designer in Greenwich, Connecticut. For 12 years, Olivia's social life was a meticulously constructed web of country club dinners, charity galas, and couples retreats. Her identity was inextricably linked to her husband's status as a hedge fund partner. When the divorce was finalized, Olivia didn't just lose a husband. She lost a zip code's worth of social infrastructure. She noticed that the group texts went silent. The dinner invitations for Saturday nights were replaced by occasional, pitying lunch invites on Tuesdays. This is the phenomenon known in sociological historical trends as divorce contagion. In many high-status American circles, divorce is viewed as a threat to the stability of the remaining marriages. Friends often pull away not because they dislike you, but because your presence reminds them of the fragility of their own domestic contracts. Step by step, the first move in your social offense is the inner circle audit. In 2026, your time and emotional bandwidth are your most valuable currencies. You must categorize your current social contacts into 3 tiers. Tier 1 are the vault friends, those who remain neutral or fiercely loyal to you personally. Tier 2 are the situational acquaintances, those whose connection was primarily through your ex-husband or the marriage. Tier 3 are the observers, those who are only hanging around for the gossip. A successful social rebrand requires you to aggressively prune Tier 3 and move cautiously with Tier 2. Olivia's mistake was trying to maintain her old life in Greenwich. Her success came when she realized that her new brand required a new audience. She stopped trying to win back the country club set and started investing in a network of professional women and fellow divorcees who viewed her transition as an evolution rather than a failure. This leads us to the second pillar of the social offense, the professional pivot. Data from 2025 and 2026 indicates that women who re-enter the workforce or pivot their careers post-divorce often experience a phenomenon called the productivity surge. Without the domestic labor of the second shift, the constant managing of a spouse's needs and the emotional heavy lifting of a failing marriage, these women find they have a 20 to 30% increase in cognitive capacity for their professional lives. However, if you have been out of the workforce for a decade like Olivia, the 2026 job market can look like a foreign planet. In the 2026 economy, entry-level administrative tasks have been largely automated by generative AI. To re-enter successfully, you cannot rely on the resume you had in 2014. Step by step, you must engage in a skills gap analysis. This involves identifying the high-value human-centric skills that AI cannot replicate: high-level negotiation, complex project management, and emotional intelligence in leadership. Olivia didn't go back to being a junior designer. Instead, she utilized her years of managing high-end home renovations to launch a consultancy specifically for women navigating their own post-divorce home transitions. She recognized a niche market of women who needed someone they could trust to help them downsize or renovate their new spaces. Case studies of successful returnships show that the LinkedIn rebrand is critical. In 2026, your LinkedIn profile is your digital storefront. You must move away from the stay-at-home mom or volunteer headers. Instead, you frame those years as operations and household management, highlighting the budgeting, scheduling, and multi-stakeholder coordination you performed. You are not asking for a job. You are offering a seasoned perspective. Historical trends suggest that employers in 2026 are increasingly seeking the stability and life experience of the silver starter demographic, women over 40, who are motivated, focused, and no longer dealing with the distractions of early career life. Beyond the career and the social circle, there is the internal boardroom of your own life. For years, you may have operated as a chief operating officer, executing a vision that was shared or dominated by someone else. Now you are the CEO. This shift in the power dynamic is often the most jarring. Imagine if Olivia, who spent years asking for approval on major purchases or clearing her weekend schedule with her husband, suddenly has to make every decision alone. First, this feels like a burden, but the Deep Dive Masterclass approach teaches us to view this as the power of one. Step by step, you must establish your own financial independence day. This isn't just about having your own bank account. It's about a psychological decoupling from the we mentality. In 2026, this includes a digital security overhaul. You must change every password, move your data to a personal cloud, and ensure that your digital footprint is entirely under your control. Historical trends in post-separation abuse show that digital tethers are the most common way ex-spouses maintain an unwanted power dynamic. By reclaiming your digital identity, you are sending a clear signal that the old board of directors has been dissolved. We must also discuss the parental rebrand. In the eyes of your children, you are no longer one half of the parenting unit. You are a solo leader. This requires a shift in how you present authority. Many women fall into the trap of being the fun parent to compensate for the trauma of the divorce, or conversely, the strict parent because they are overwhelmed. The 2026 successful co-parenting model suggests a middle path. The predictable leader. By establishing clear, independent household rules that are yours alone, you provide a sense of security for your children that isn't dependent on what is happening at their father's house. You are building a new culture within your own four walls. The potential outcomes for women who master this social and professional pivot are extraordinary. We are seeing the rise of the success divorcee archetype in American culture. Women who use their divorce not as a conclusion, but as a launching pad. They are more financially literate, more professionally aggressive, and more socially selective than they were during their marriages. They have replaced the supportive wife role with the author of her own life role. But even with a new career, a curated social circle, and a solid grip on your internal power, there is a lingering question that every woman in this position eventually faces. It is the question of the future, specifically, the landscape of modern American companionship in 2026. The dating market has been completely upended by technology, shifting social norms, and a new set of risks that didn't exist a decade ago. How do you protect your newly won assets and your children's peace while exploring the possibility of a new partner? What are the red flag data points you need to look for in the age of digital deception? In our next part, we are going to dive into the 2026 dating audit. We are going to look at the legal and personal safeguards you must put in place before you ever let someone new into your life. The predator-prey dynamic in the modern dating world is real, and for a woman with assets and children, the stakes couldn't be higher. We are moving from rebuilding your life to protecting it. The transition from reestablishing your independence to inviting a new person into your ecosystem is perhaps the most precarious phase of the post-divorce journey in 2026. In this modern landscape, dating is no longer just a matter of the heart. For a woman who has successfully navigated a divorce settlement, it is a matter of asset protection and risk management. Historical trends suggest that women who have recently exited long-term marriages are frequently targeted by what sociologists call lifestyle parasites, individuals who seek out partners with established domestic stability and liquid assets to subsidize their own lives. In 2026, the tools for this kind of predation have become more sophisticated, utilizing social engineering and digital personas that are difficult to verify without a specific, step-by-step protocol. Imagine if you are Emma, a 41-year-old software engineer in Denver. After a 2-year legal battle, Emma walked away with her retirement accounts intact, a significant portion of the equity in her home, and a 5-year alimony award. 6 months later, she meets Liam on a high-end dating app designed for professionals. Liam is charming, seemingly successful as a sustainability consultant, and matches Emma's intellectual energy. However, Emma is operating in the 2026 dating market, where deepfake technology and AI-augmented social media profiles have made it possible for someone to fabricate an entire professional history. The first step in Emma's dating audit is the digital identity verification. In 2026, simply Googling someone is insufficient. Potential outcomes of a lack of vetting include financial entanglement with someone who has undisclosed debts or a history of litigation. Emma's protocol involves a cross-reference of professional licenses and a search of the Public Litigation Index. If Liam claims to be a consultant, Emma looks for his business registration in the Secretary of State's database. She uses a reverse image search on his profile photos to ensure they aren't stolen from a stock site or a minor public figure in another country. This isn't paranoia. It is the due diligence required when you have a net worth that you are legally obligated to protect for your own future and that of your children. The second pillar of protection involves the 2026 dating financial audit. We are seeing a historical trend where modern couples are moving toward financial transparency much earlier in the relationship. Case studies indicate that successful long-term partnerships in this demographic often begin with a mutual credit score exchange before the relationship moves into cohabitation. For a woman like Emma, understanding a partner's debt-to-income ratio is critical. If Liam is carrying 6-figure student loan debt or has a history of tax liens, his entry into Emma's life creates a financial gravity that will inevitably pull on her resources. In 2026, women are increasingly utilizing cohabitation agreements, essentially a prenuptial agreement for people who aren't getting married, to specify that assets remain separate and that the new partner has no claim to the home equity or the appreciation of assets during the relationship. The third and most sensitive front is the protection of children. In 2026, the psychological data is clearer than ever. The revolving door of mothers' boyfriends is one of the most significant stressors for children of divorce. The step-by-step detail for child integration starts with the 6-month rule. This is a boundary where a new partner is not introduced to the children until the relationship has been stable and exclusive for at least half a year. During this time, the partner should have no access to the home while the children are present. Imagine the potential outcomes if Emma ignores this and introduces Liam after 3 weeks. If the relationship fails 2 months later, the children experience a secondary abandonment, mirroring the trauma of the initial divorce. Furthermore, in 2026, many parenting plans include a clause that allows the other parent to vet any significant other who will be spending substantial time with the children. If Emma's ex-husband finds out Liam has a reckless driving record or a dismissed domestic charge from 10 years ago, He can use this as leverage to file for a modification of custody. We must also dive deep into the alimony trap. In the United States, most alimony awards include a cohabitation clause. This means that if Emma's new partner moves in, or even if he spends more than a certain number of nights per week at her house, her ex-husband can petition the court to terminate her alimony payments. The legal definition of cohabitation in 2026 has evolved. It is no longer just about sharing a bed. Courts look at the economic interdependence of the new couple. If Liam is using Emma's address for his mail, if he is helping with the groceries, or if they are seen acting as a family unit in public, a judge may decide that Emma's need for support has diminished because she is being subsidized, or is subsidizing another person. Consider the case study of Sophia, a woman in Atlanta who lost her $3,000 monthly alimony award because her ex-husband hired a private investigator who tracked her new boyfriend's car at her house for 22 consecutive nights. The investigator also produced social media posts where the boyfriend referred to Sophia's house as home. The court ruled that this constituted a supportive relationship, and Sophia's alimony was permanently terminated. To avoid this potential outcome, the 2026 protocol requires a strict separation of households. Your new partner should not have a key, should not have a drawer in your dresser, and should maintain a completely separate legal residence with a utility bill in their own name. The psychological warfare we discussed in Part 4 also extends into this territory. High-conflict ex-spouses often use the introduction of a new partner as a catalyst for a new round of litigation. They may claim the new partner is an unfit influence, or use the new relationship to paint the mother as distracted or neglectful. Step by step, you must keep the new relationship entirely separate from the co-parenting dynamic. Your new partner should not be at the school pickup line, should not be on the group texts with the ex-husband, and should not be involved in any discipline of the children. By maintaining these boundaries, you are not just protecting your children, you are protecting your legal standing. As we look at the historical trends of 2026, we see that the most successful women are those who treat their post-divorce life as a high-security vault. You have worked hard to secure your financial future, your emotional peace, and your children's stability. Inviting someone into that vault requires a high level of clearance. You are the gatekeeper. The 2026 dating audit is your security system. It allows you to explore the possibility of companionship without surrendering the hard-won autonomy that defines your new life. The potential outcomes of a well-vetted relationship are beautiful. A partnership based on mutual respect rather than economic necessity. But the potential outcomes of a rushed or unvetted relationship can be a return to the very courtroom you just escaped. We are moving toward a future where women are no longer the victims of romance scams or lifestyle parasites, because they are armed with the data, the legal tools, and the psychological boundaries to vet their suitors with the precision of a corporate investigator. But even with your financial and social house in order, and even with your dating life properly audited, there is one final internal hurdle that often stops women from truly thriving. It is the invisible weight of the internal narrative. You can win the court case, protect the money, and find a great new partner. But if you haven't addressed the fundamental shift in your identity, you will always be a survivor rather than a thriver. In our next part, we are going to explore the concept of post-traumatic growth in the context of the American divorce. We are going to look at the data on how women are not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward into versions of themselves they never thought possible. We are going to discuss the science of the identity rebrand and why 2026 is the year the American woman finally stops apologizing for her evolution. The most profound part of this masterclass is yet to come, and it begins with the person you see in the mirror every morning. The person looking back at you in the mirror in 2026 is often a stranger to the woman who walked into a lawyer's office 18 months ago. This is not a failure of character. It is a mechanical necessity of the transition. In the field of psychology, we are seeing a massive surge in the study of post-traumatic growth, or PTG. While the historical trend for decades was to focus solely on post-traumatic stress disorder following a divorce, the data in 2026 suggests that a significant percentage of women experience a profound upward shift in 5 key areas: personal strength, new possibilities, improved relationships, appreciation for life, and spiritual or existential development. This is the science of bouncing forward, and it requires a systematic identity rebrand that goes far deeper than a new wardrobe or a haircut. Imagine if you are Isabella, a 48-year-old nurse practitioner in Portland, Oregon. Isabella's 24-year marriage ended when she discovered a parallel life her husband had been leading. In the immediate aftermath, Isabella felt like her past was a lie and her future was a void. She was stuck in the survivor phase where every decision was reactionary. However, Isabella began utilizing the 2026 Identity Reconstruction Protocol, a step-by-step framework designed to decouple a woman's self-worth from her marital status. The first step in this protocol is the narrative audit. Isabella had to sit down and write the story of her marriage not as a tragedy, but as a completed chapter of education. In 2026, we use the term evolutionary storytelling. Instead of saying my marriage failed, Isabella learned to say my marriage reached its natural conclusion after providing the lessons I needed for my next phase of growth. This shift in language is the foundation of the identity rebrand. The second step in the identity rebrand is the sensory purge and environmental reset. In 2026, we understand more about neuroplasticity than ever before. Your brain creates powerful neural pathways linked to the sights, sounds, and smells of your marital home. If you stay in the same environment with the same sensory cues, your brain remains in a loop of the past. Isabella took this literally. She utilized a trend in 2026 called dopamine decor, where she systematically removed every item that carried a heavy emotional weight from her marriage. She repainted her bedroom in a color her ex-husband had always disliked. She changed the scent profile of her home from lavender to citrus. She even changed her route to work. These small step-by-step changes forced her brain to forge new neural pathways, effectively signaling to her nervous system that the old era was over and a new safe era had begun. Historical trends show that women often fall into the trap of the placeholder identity. This is where a woman immediately jumps into a new role, be it a new relationship, an obsessive fitness journey, or a workaholic state, to avoid the discomfort of the void. But the 2026 Masterclass approach encourages leaning into the void. This is where the case study of Isabella becomes truly transformative. Instead of filling the silence, she began what is known as interest prototyping. She spent 3 months trying activities she had never considered, because they didn't fit the brand of the couple she used to be. She took a solo backpacking trip, joined a local coding boot camp, and started a community garden project. Potential outcomes of this phase are not necessarily finding a new lifelong hobby, but rather proving to yourself that your identity is fluid and capable of expansion. The third pillar of this identity shift is the social scaffolding. In previous decades, a divorced woman might have been absorbed into a group of other divorcees to commiserate. In 2026, we advocate for a curated tribe of forward movers. Isabella stopped attending the Sunday brunch where the main topic was her ex-husband's latest social media posts. Instead, she sought out mentors, women who were 5 or 10 years post-divorce and were operating at a high level of professional and personal success. Data suggests that your identity is heavily influenced by the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If those people are stuck in the grievance phase, you will remain stuck there too. Isabella's shift into a circle of high-achieving, independent women provided the social proof she needed that her new identity was not just possible, but highly desirable. Step by step, we must also address the physicality of the rebrand. This is not about vanity. It is about reclaiming the physical vessel that has been under stress for years. In 2026, we see a rise in personalized wellness based on cortisol management. Chronic marital stress keeps the body in a state of high inflammation. Isabella worked with a nutritionist to focus on an anti-inflammatory diet, specifically designed to repair the damage of long-term psychological stress. She moved away from high-impact, high-stress exercise and toward activities that regulated her nervous system, like cold plunging and restorative yoga. The potential outcome here was a radical change in her energy levels and cognitive clarity, which in turn fueled her professional pivot into a leadership role at her clinic. Furthermore, we must look at the financial identity rebrand. For many women, their relationship with money was a shared or subordinate one. In 2026, true identity reconstruction requires financial literacy. Isabella took a deep dive into her own investment strategy, moving away from the conservative, fear-based approach she had during the divorce and toward an aggressive growth strategy for her retirement. She stopped seeing herself as someone who was given a settlement and started seeing herself as an asset manager. This shift from passive recipient to active manager is a critical component of the post-divorce power dynamic. The 2026 American woman is redefining what it means to be a divorcee. She is no longer an object of pity or a cautionary tale. She is a case study in resilience and self-actualization. Isabella's story ended not with her finding a new husband, but with her finding a version of herself that was so robust and vibrant that she no longer needed external validation to feel complete. She had successfully transitioned from the survivor of a divorce to the architect of a legacy. This internal work is the silent engine that drives every other part of the divorce process. Without it, the legal wins are hollow and the financial gains are temporary. But when a woman masters her internal narrative, she becomes a formidable force in every other arena. She negotiates better in the boardroom, she parents with more clarity in the nursery, and she vets her partners with more precision in the dating world. We have moved from the external defense to the internal offense. However, as you step into this new powerful identity, there is one final technical frontier you must master. It is the one that secures the long-term future for the woman you have become and the children you are raising. Many women find their new identity, but they fail to build the legal and financial fortress around it to protect it from the unexpected. In our next part, we are going to dive into advanced estate planning and strategic wealth growth for the solo woman in 2026. We are going to look at the specific tax structures and legacy tools that ensure your hard-won autonomy isn't just a phase, but a permanent foundation. We are moving from the mirror to the vault, and the level of detail we are about to reveal will change the way you look at your net worth forever. Moving from the mirror to the vault requires a fundamental shift in how you perceive the duration of your influence. In 2026, the financial independence of the American woman is not just about monthly cash flow. It is about the structural integrity of her estate. Historical trends show that women often emerge from the divorce process with a significant liquid or semi-liquid settlement, but fail to transition into a wealth preservation mindset. They treat their settlement as a static safety net, rather than a dynamic engine for long-term growth. To secure a permanent foundation, we must look at advanced estate planning and strategic wealth growth through the lens of a solo navigator. Imagine if you are Gabrielle, a 50-year-old architectural consultant in Phoenix, Arizona. Gabrielle recently finalized her divorce, receiving a mid-seven-figure settlement that included a mix of home equity, a portion of her ex-husband's private equity interests, and a diversified brokerage account. For months, Gabrielle has been paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake. She keeps a large portion of her settlement in a standard high-yield savings account, watching inflation erode her purchasing power. She hasn't updated her will since 2018, and her medical power of attorney still lists her ex-husband as the primary decision-maker. Gabrielle is technically wealthy but structurally vulnerable. The first step in the 2026 Vault Protocol is the beneficiary audit and the ex-spouse ghost. In the United States, a divorce decree does not automatically override a named beneficiary on a life insurance policy, a 401k, or an IRA. Case studies frequently reveal heartbreaking scenarios where a woman passes away years after a divorce, only for her entire retirement savings to be legally funneled to an ex-husband because she neglected to update a single form. In 2026, this process is digital but requires manual verification across every institution. Step by step, you must inventory every account, including those small, forgotten pensions from early career jobs, and submit updated beneficiary designations that reflect your new solo status or your children's trust. This leads us to the second pillar, the revocable living trust as a shield. In 2026, relying on a simple will is often viewed by estate planners as an outdated strategy for a solo woman of means. A will must go through probate, a public, time-consuming, and expensive court process. For a woman who has just escaped a public and invasive legal battle, the privacy of a revocable living trust is invaluable. Imagine if Gabrielle were to become incapacitated. Without a trust, the court might appoint a conservator to manage her assets, a process that can be as contentious as the divorce itself. By moving her assets into a trust, Gabrielle retains total control during her life, ensures that her medical and financial proxies are people she trusts today, and provides a seamless, private transition of wealth to her heirs without the interference of a probate judge. Data from the 2026 Financial Literacy Report suggests that women are increasingly utilizing asset protection trusts to safeguard their settlements from future liabilities. While we discuss the dating audit in Part 7, the legal reality is that any future relationship, even a long-term cohabitation, can create financial entanglement. By placing her primary settlement into a separate property trust before any future marriage or cohabitation, Gabrielle creates a clear, legal boundary. This is not about a lack of trust in a future partner. It is about the strategic preservation of the assets she fought for. It ensures that the potential outcomes of a second relationship do not include the loss of the first relationship settlement. Strategic wealth growth in 2026 also requires a sophisticated approach to tax-advantaged investing. As a single filer, your tax brackets are narrower than they were when you were married filing jointly. This is the marriage penalty in reverse. To counter this, the deep dive strategy involves the Roth conversion ladder. Case studies show that women who strategically convert portions of their traditional IRAs to Roth IRAs during lower income years, perhaps the gap years right after a divorce, can build a massive tax-free bucket for their later years. Step by step, this involves calculating your current tax bracket, projecting your future tax liability, and moving assets in a way that minimizes the immediate tax hit while maximizing long-term growth. Furthermore, we must address the 2026 investment landscape. Historical trends indicate that women are generally more risk-aware investors, which can lead to overallocation in cash and bonds. In 2026, however, with the rise of sustainable infrastructure and AI-driven healthcare, the growth opportunities are concentrated in equities. Gabrielle's protocol included a shift from passive saving to active thematic investing. She worked with a fiduciary advisor to build a portfolio that reflected her values, focusing on ESG-compliant technology and female-led venture capital funds, while maintaining a core of low-cost index funds. This approach allows a woman to use her capital to influence the culture she is now an independent part of. The third front is the insurance fortress. In a dual-income household, the loss of one partner's income is a crisis. In a solo household, the loss of your own income is a catastrophe. For the modern American woman, disability insurance and long-term care insurance are not optional. Data indicates that women, on average, live longer than men but often spend those later years with more chronic health challenges. If Gabrielle relies solely on her settlement to cover a potential long-term care need, she could see her entire legacy liquidated by nursing home costs in under a decade. The 2026 strategy involves hybrid life insurance policies with long-term care riders. This allows the asset to grow and provide a death benefit to her children, but also offers a pool of funds to pay for her care if she needs it, protecting her other investments from being drained. Step by step, Gabrielle also engaged in legacy planning beyond just the money. This involves a digital legacy vault. In 2026, our lives are documented in thousands of photos, videos, and private communications. Gabrielle's estate plan included a specific provision for her digital assets, passwords for her cloud storage, instructions for her social media accounts, and the encryption keys for her digital property. She realized that her identity, which she worked so hard to reclaim, deserved a digital executor who understood its value. The potential outcomes of this advanced planning are a sense of profound, unshakable security. When Gabrielle finished her vault protocol, the anxiety that had shadowed her since the divorce filing finally lifted. She no longer felt like a woman with a pile of money she might lose. She felt like the founder of a family dynasty. She had established a legal and financial structure that was independent of any man, any court, and any future economic shift. But as we reach this peak of financial and legal mastery, we must acknowledge that a vault is only as good as the world it exists in. You have built your fortress, you have reclaimed your name, and you have secured your children's future. But you are not an island. The American woman of 2026 is stepping back into a society that is still catching up to her evolution. There is one final layer to this masterclass, the synthesis of everything we have learned into a new philosophy of living. How do we take this hard-won wisdom and use it to reshape the American social contract itself? How do you move from the vault back into the light of a world that needs your leadership and your story? In our 10th and final part, we are going to look at the global influence of the new American woman. We are going to discuss the final word on the cultural shift we've been tracking and how you can become an architect of the future, not just a survivor of the past. The journey ends where the new world begins. The new world begins with the realization that the fortress you built in the previous phase of this masterclass is not a prison designed to keep the world out, but a launchpad designed to propel you into a version of American life that did not exist a generation ago. In 2026, we are witnessing the emergence of the architect era. This is the final and most profound cultural shift, the transition from viewing divorce as a subtractive event to seeing it as a generative one. Historical trends over the last decade have shown that when a woman successfully navigates the legal and financial gauntlet with her dignity and assets intact, she doesn't just return to the status quo. She becomes a primary mover in the American economy and a cultural trendsetter for the next generation. Imagine if you are Natalie, a 52-year-old former educator in Chicago who, after her divorce in 2025, used her settlement and her newfound autonomy to establish a regional nonprofit that focuses on financial literacy for young women. Natalie's story is a case study in the multiplier effect of the empowered woman. She spent 20 years in a marriage where her primary role was the management of a private sphere. Today, in 2026, she is a public architect. She is not just living a life. She is designing a system that ensures the women coming after her do not have to learn these lessons through trauma. This is the synthesis of everything we have discussed. The legal knowledge, the financial mastery, the psychological resilience, and the social rebranding all coming together to create a new American social contract. Step by step, the first move in this final phase is the narrative conversion. You must take the data of your past and convert it into a curriculum for your future. In 2026, the most successful women are those who treat their divorce experience as a specialized degree. They don't hide the divorce gap on their resumes or in their social circles. They frame it as a masterclass in negotiation, crisis management, and strategic planning. Case studies of female CEOs in 2026 show a significant trend of leaders who point to their domestic restructuring as the moment they truly learn to manage complex, high-stakes organizations. The potential outcomes of this shift are a radical increase in your professional value. You are no longer someone who is broken and healed. You are someone who is tested and optimized. The second pillar of the 2026 philosophy of living is the mentorship mandate. We are seeing a historical trend where the isolation of the 20th century divorce is being replaced by the divorce mentorship network. Step by step, you should look for opportunities to act as a third-party advocate for women currently entering the discovery phase of their own legal battles. This is not about giving legal advice, which we have strictly defined as the domain of professionals, but about providing the institutional knowledge of the process. In 2026, we see groups of women forming what are known as board of directors circles, where they meet quarterly to review each other's personal and professional goals, ensuring that no one is slipping back into the passive roles of their previous lives. The third front is the impact on the next generation. This is where the cultural shift becomes permanent. If you are a mother, the way you navigate 2026 as an independent woman is the primary blueprint for your children's future relationships. We are seeing data that suggests children of architect mothers, women who handled their divorce with transparency and strategic strength, have a higher level of relational literacy. They grow up seeing that a marriage is a contract that requires mutual respect and equity to be valid, and they see that an individual's worth is never secondary to a partnership. Imagine if Natalie's daughter grows up in a world where she doesn't fear the end of a relationship because she has seen her mother thrive, build a business, and maintain a peaceful home as a solo leader. This removes the fear-based attachment styles that have plagued American marriages for a century. We must also address the global influence of this movement. In 2026, the American model of the sovereign woman is being exported through digital media and international business. As American women reclaim their financial power and rewrite the domestic narrative, we are seeing similar legal and social movements in Europe and East Asia. The historical momentum is toward a global recognition of matrilineal wealth transfer, where women are becoming the primary holders of intergenerational wealth. By securing your vault in Part 9, you have positioned yourself as a participant in this global shift. You are not just a single woman in a U.S. suburb. You are a data point in a global trend toward female financial sovereignty. The potential outcomes for a society led by these architects are profound. We are looking at a future where the second shift is no longer a silent expectation but a negotiated reality. We are moving toward a world where conscious partnership is the standard, and where the legal system reflects the complexity of modern life, rather than the biases of the 1950s. The Deep Dive Masterclass you have just completed is your entry ticket into this new world. You have the tools to audit your life, the language to defend your boundaries, and the strategy to grow your legacy. But there is a final word on the open loop of your new life. You have mastered the how of the exit and the how of the rebuild. Now you must face the what for. In 2026, the question is no longer, how do I survive my divorce? But, what will I build with my freedom? The journey you have taken over these 10 parts has been about removing the weights that held you back. Now that you are weightless, how high will you fly? As we close this masterclass, remember that the cultural shifts we have tracked are still in motion. The laws will continue to evolve, the economy will continue to pivot, and the social norms will continue to be rewritten. But you are no longer a passenger in this change. You are the driver. You have moved from the vulnerability of the hook in Part 1 to the absolute authority of the architect in Part 10. The masterclass is over, but your deep dive into the rest of your life is just beginning. While this series focused on the domestic and legal transition, There is an even deeper current running through the American economy in 2026. Many women are finding that once they have mastered their personal finances, they are ready to tackle the final frontier of the wealth gap. In our next series, we will explore the equity revolution. We will look at how the 2026 tax codes and new investment vehicles are allowing solo women to outperform the traditional markets. We are going to dive into the venture of one and how you can use your settlement as the seed money for a legacy that lasts for centuries. The door to the vault is open, and it is time to see how much room there is to grow. The loop of your marriage is closed, but the loop of your empire is just starting to form. Stay tuned for the next phase of your evolution.